Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Senate hearing and committee. We are going to ask you to join us, please, in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Senator Ennis, will you do the honors?
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We are now going to open the hearing on House Bill 74. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you very much. My name is Michael Cahill. I represent the towns of Newfields and Newmarket in Rockingham 10. And we're here today to talk about HB 74, which is a bill. Let me tell you, first of all, what it doesn't do. It doesn't require any employer to offer paid time off, vacation, sick days, anything like that. That's not a requirement. And it doesn't, and any employer that has 15 or fewer, that has fewer than 15 employees, this bill doesn't do anything for them. They're exempt from this. However, those who are larger employers and who do choose to offer vacation, paid time off, etc., this bill would require, we would do away with the policy of, have a blanket statement that no, upon termination, regardless of the circumstances, any vacation that you earned and did not use vanishes. And I've sent you some materials that have examples of this happening. And it's just terrible. It's the wrong thing to do. It's a bad look for the employer, and certainly the employee who sees 2 to 3 weeks vacation on their previous pay stub disappear. I can say that's a very bad look and a very bad feeling that what they've earned, but were denied the opportunity to use, should not disappear. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the materials I sent your way over the weekend. So this is I'm thinking particularly of a situation that happened with an employer in my town of Newmarket. The company was sold. They sold the assets, but not all the liabilities. And among the liabilities was a vacation time that was accrued by, there were 5 employees who continued working for the new employer. And yet they didn't, the hours weren't transferred over, which I think is the custom. It's not required by law, but it's the custom. It's what any employee would expect to happen. If you've ever been through this with your company is sold, that's what typically happens. But in this case, it didn't. And you can see that they lost ranging from $300 to $591. That's significant money. And the total that, of the people who bothered to file a claim, the total that the employer retained, the previous owner retained, was $2,261.44. And they were able to do this, even though the people went to the Labor Department, filed a claim, went to the hearing. They're able to do this because of the statute that says that it is determined by the employer, their practice or policy. And if they say that their policy is we do not pay vacation time upon termination, that's what stands. And I believe this is a common occurrence. It's at least 20% of the cases that that go to the Labor Department, and that's a lot of people who are not. I'm not saying that everyone is justified or everyone is like this, but there are some, and they have the burden of proof to make the case, but the hearing officer is cut off. He can't look at, was it fair? Did they have an opportunity? All he can look at is, what's the employer policy? And I think that policies such as use it or lose it, an annual use it or lose it, you determine the carryover amount, that's not changed by this law. It's only this one blanket policy that lets the employer walk off with whatever they can extract, whatever the people didn't get to use. When they were laid off, when the company was sold, or even in the case where for whatever reason, you're changing jobs, you give the 2 weeks notice, that's a courtesy. I think courtesy is extended both ways. You work your notice, is you leaving in good standing. Whatever you have left, maybe you could have taken the time off and then skulked out the door. And your employer would be thinking, why didn't I know sooner? Why wasn't I able to hire someone and maybe benefit from this person's experience? What if this is my accountant or my IT person? It would have been helpful to have him giving the new employee the opportunity to see some of their insights. But now I didn't have that because my policy was, if you don't use it, you lose it. So I can see that there's benefit on both sides to passing this law, doing away with that one blanket statement. I did send you another case, again, where they weren't able to consider the fairness. There was a layoff, and of course, if you've ever been laid off, you know you don't get notice. There was a layoff, and the woman was let go, and she had I think $2,300 in vacation time that she would have used. But the policy, as I included in the document, was that you had to ask 3 weeks in advance and give 2 weeks notice if you were leaving. Then they would pay you the accrued time. But in this case, there was no opportunity for either, because today's your last day. You can't request your vacation time because you're not working here after today, and we didn't give you any notice. So I think my good friend Mr. Gervais behind me agrees that these are egregious. His word. I think it's a very good word. These are egregious examples, but he struggled with what can we do to eliminate those without touching the sacrosanct ability for an employer to make their own policy. Well, I think what we have here is a way to do that. You can do all the other policies that decide whether or not to have paid time off or vacation. You can determine how it's offered, how it's used. You should track it. That's good business practice, again, from my friend Mr. Gervais. And it's not a burden for employers to do that, but you should not have the person leave the job, whether it's their decision or beyond their control, and lose what they had worked for and earned. This is indeed part of compensation. So I also included some recent claim information. Now, when someone contacts the Department of Labor, tell them what happened in their case, they may be told that, well, it's the employer's practice or policy, and a lot of people probably don't bother following through and doing a claim. You have to be pretty determined to think, I can right this wrong. And I sent this document that has a list of some of the recent situations when you can see that this is still happening. It's a longstanding practice of not paying the unused vacation at term. It's just something that shouldn't happen. It shouldn't continue, and this bill would end it. We did pass it out of the House. I had 4 Republican co-sponsors, 16 Republican House members voted to pass it on a roll call vote. It's something that your constituents, I think, would appreciate. Even if it hasn't happened to them, we don't want it to happen to them. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Members of the committee, do you have any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank
The
you.
chair will recognize Dave Dubay.
Madam Chair, could I be joined by Andrea
Of
Chatfield?
course.
It's sort of a buy one, get one free type of thing.
Good morning, nice to see you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dave Dubay. I'm a Senior Vice President for Public Policy with the Business and Industry Association. I'm joined here this morning with Andrea Chatfield. She's a employment law attorney with Sheehan Finney, and she is here this morning representing the HR State Council of New Hampshire. We are here in opposition to this bill I would like to use my time to state the philosophy why employers are opposed to this. And then my colleague Andrea Chatfield will go into some detail about the problems it will create for employers if it's signed into law. This bill, while short, does something rather profound. It changes what has been and what has always been a benefit into something completely different, compensation. And you'll note on pages, or on the first page, lines 12 and 13, it states that clearly. For the purpose of this section, the terms earned time, vacation, or vacation time and paid time off shall be considered compensation and therefore constitute wages due. I'm here to stress that employee benefits are not compensation. They are benefits. They are provided by the employer to both retain and hopefully attract employees to the workplace. They're not meant to be considered compensation. And this is why employees don't have the option of saying, I appreciate that you give me health insurance as a benefit, but I don't want it, but I'll take the pay, I'll take the increased compensation that you would have been paying for that benefit. Or sick time. I appreciate that you're offering me sick time, but I don't use sick time, so I should be paid for that. Or in the case of this legislation, I appreciate that you're giving me paid time off for vacation, but I'm not going to use it and therefore should be paid for that time. That is not a concept that has been recognized here in New Hampshire. So I would urge you for that reason alone to oppose this, because it opens up a door for treating benefits as something other than benefits. And let me now turn it over to Andrea.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for letting me testify today. I'm an employment law attorney, and I work on a lot of employee handbooks that have PTO, vacation, sick time policies. I've probably worked on hundreds of them over my 30 years of practice. But I also work with the HR State Council of New Hampshire, and I work a lot with human resource professionals. And that's a voice for a bill like this you need to hear from today. And that's who I'm representing today, as well as my experience. HR professionals, don't get me wrong, they're for PTO. Human resource professionals really appreciate what a value that fringe benefit can give to their employees. PTO is about paid time off. It's a benefit that is about encouraging employees to take time off, to rest, to relax, to take care of pertinent family issues. It's not supposed to be always an extra paycheck. That being said, a lot of employers in this state do pay out earned vacation time or PTO time upon termination of employment. In many situations, I've worked on those handbooks, I know it. But what this bill is not, the problem with this bill is it's really inconsistent with what's been a longstanding policy in this state of saying to employers and business owners, we're going to let you decide what you want to offer for fringe benefits and what the terms and conditions of those fringe benefits will be. And one part of the law you should know about, the current law now under 275-49, Roman numeral 3, that's our current law today. And it says employers, if you have fringe benefits, you must provide written notice of the terms and conditions of those benefits to your employees. And if you change those terms and conditions, you must provide them to employees. And in the regulations from the New Hampshire Department of Labor, it says that the notice should be signed by the employee. So therefore, that's why employee handbooks are a very common way of conveying these policies, because the policies are in the handbook and there's usually a receipt page that the employee signs acknowledging receipt of the handbook. So a lot of times I always say the only policy any employee will probably ever read in the employee handbook is the paid time off policy. But that's the current law, and that's the consistent with our public policy of not having the state come in and start legislating fringe benefits. Some of the problems we have with this is a lot of employers are migrating to what we call PTO benefit, which instead of having a separate policy for an amount of vacation time, an amount of sick time, an amount of personal time, they lump it all together, and sometimes they include the paid holidays so that the employee gets one bucket of paid time off. It's easier to administrate for employers, but it also provides employees with a lot of the flexibility to say, well, I'm going to need what I normally would have taken for vacation. I need because I have a serious illness, or I'm pretty healthy and I'd like to take extra vacation time. They have that flexibility with PTO policies. This bill lumps all that together and says all of that would need to be paid out upon termination of employment, when traditionally sick time or personal time would not have been paid out. That's going to really make employers rethink PTO policies and rethink how much paid time off they're going to provide or let employees accrue. Because now they have to consider all of that unused time as a financial liability in their financial statements. They have to book it as a financial liability. And that's one of those factors that's really important for employers to think about when they're deciding, do we pay it out or do we not pay it out? And that's going to be a very heavy burden for nonprofits and smaller employers. And finally, the other thing, there's a few things I wanted to point out in the actual wording of the bill that we have big concerns about. The first is, I appreciate the fact that it limits the payout to when employees leave who leave in good standing, and I'm not quite sure what that means. I've been doing this a long time, and it's not a phrase that is used in the statutes. It's not defined in the statutes or defined in case law that I could find. And it can be interpreted in different ways. Sometimes you might have a mutual separation of employment arrangement because the employer decides it's time for that person to leave, and the person says, okay, I'll leave. If you pay me a separation package, that's fine. But is that leaving in good standing or not? Because the employee would have been terminated anyway. You might have an employee who is terminated for very poor performance. Is that leaving in good standing? Not quite sure. And the way the bill is designed, that definition or that language could be interpreted by the Department of Labor hearing officers, or it could be interpreted in a court of law. And what I'm concerned about is it's going to have potentially inconsistent results and inconsistent interpretations. Yet another nightmare for HR people to figure out when they're trying to deal with termination or a separation of an employee. There's a couple of other things. One says that it requires the employer to have an accounting of the time that is used and unused and provide that to employees. That's not always in employers' control, believe it or not, because when employers are using payroll companies, sometimes those payroll companies are inaccurate or they don't track it properly. But what's put on the pay stub is not always going to be accurate. And the Department of Labor has recognized that in the past. So that might be something that would be out of an employer's control, and yet they could be in violation of this statute. And finally, it talks about employees who are laid off. But the problem is what happens if it's a temporary layoff? If you lay off, and we had a lot of temporary layoffs back in 2020 with COVID, where people were laid off for 2 months or maybe 3 months, but then brought back. So you've paid out all their vacation time or their PTO time when they were laid off, and yet you're bringing them back, and now they're brought back with a slate of 0, and they would have to reaccrue. The last thing I want to mention is that employers, not a lot, but it's growing, that they're moving towards what they call unlimited PTO. And what that means is the employer says, I'm not going to give you a set amount of time off. You take it as you need it, but it's unlimited. And that, again, allows a lot of flexibility for employees. But I'm not sure how that would play into this statute, because the statute talks about that if there is no accrual method, then PTO would be paid out on a prorated basis, and I'm not quite sure if this would apply to unlimited PTO or not. But so there's a lot of questions. I think it would result in a lot of unanswered questions for HR professionals and business owners. I think it would be a huge financial liability that a lot of smaller employers and nonprofits would have to book on their financials and budget for. And again, it's taking away an area of discretion and an area of judgment that the state has always said employers have the right to do, and how to legislate their own policies. Thank you.
And just two final points. The sponsor of the legislation in testifying mentioned a policy that is commonly known as use it or lose it. My employer, the Business and Industry Association, has a use it or lose it policy, which means I get a certain amount of vacation time, paid vacation time during the year. But if I haven't used all of that time by December 31st, I lose whatever vacation time I didn't take. This bill is unclear on what happens to that, and it creates yet another inconsistency. If you're an employee working for a use it or lose it company and you leave in good standing, whatever that means, you get paid for that accrued but unused time. But if you're an employee who works for the use it or lose it company and you don't leave, you lose that time at the end of the year. You're not paid for it. So in one sense, it's treated as compensation. As another sense, it's treated as a benefit and not as compensation. So we are here asking that you oppose this bill. It seems on the surface to be a very simple bill. It seems on the surface to maybe be a fair bill, but it creates all kinds of problems. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. We would be happy to try and answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee? Senator Ennis?
Just a quick question, and it's probably a question better asked of a tax accountant. But it seems to me if we move this from benefit to compensation, which is essentially what you're suggesting, might somehow end up being taxable.
Well, I'm actually suggesting that you don't do that.
Well, I know you are, and that's my point. If we do it, then I fear it could become taxable as income, when in fact it isn't income.
Well, it would become taxable as income, although if you are paid, if you take vacation time and you're paid for that time, that's taxable as income already. Yeah. What this does from the employer, though, is it creates a situation where it could cost the employer additional money. And here's how that happens. Let's say you're an employee and you purposefully don't take your vacation time. Mm-hmm. At the point where you terminate, you get paid for all of that accrued vacation time.
Yes.
Plus, you've also been paid for the time that you worked. So it's almost like collecting an extra paycheck.
Yeah, it is. I've been in that position. But, yeah, okay. Thank you.
I'd like to just add that I think PTO, anytime you pay it out, it is treated as a W-2 wage for tax purposes. For the employer, though, my point was that if you have that potential liability of having to pay out, you've got unused PTO on your books for all your employees, that then has to be accounted for in your financials. And you have to make sure if you're balancing a budget that you're accounting for that as a set liability.
I guess that's kind of where I was going, but I didn't phrase it properly. But yes, thank you.
Any other members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. And the chair will now recognize Gary Abbott. Good morning, Gary. Nice to see you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman, Senators. For the record, my name's Gary Abbott. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Associated General Contractors of New Hampshire. We're here today in opposition to this bill. It's great to have testimony before you that repeats most of what I was going to cover, so I definitely will shorten up. But I do want to mention that this kind of narrowly takes what I consider office policies and one piece of it. Companies have to develop office policies that cover vacation, sick, jury duty, All those things are in an office policy. And this, I agree, line 13, it turns it into wages. It is the first time in which it makes it compensable wages. And I represent an industry that has seasonal workers in some cases. They have different varying, and they develop those policies. Each company is different, and not every one of them probably use earned time as the method. Some also will have terms and conditions, and I think this is where previous testimony talked about line 17 in good standing. It's missing the what is good standing. Is good standing that you left the company and you turned in your cell phone and your truck or your other? What is good standing? Is good standing that you met the office policy conditions? What is the Labor Department going to hear in a dispute? I mean, we believe that people that have met the conditions of the office policy to get paid when they leave the company, as long as they followed those office policies that are part of the company's conditions, that's what is in place today, and it has worked well for some 30 years, because I can remember when we were helping companies all put in place office policies, because if you had a dispute, if an employee left your company and said, oh, I believe I needed more vacation time, I didn't get it all, you could appeal to the Department of Labor. Department of Labor would hear the case and look at your company office policies to make the determination. And we gave guidance to companies that have a good office policy. And many of them work with legal entities to develop those policies. And the department rules based on those company policies. So that's what should stay in place, because if the state goes down this path of trying to define office policies, I think it's a slippery slope. This is the first step. Are we going to decide on sick time? Are we going to decide on the other leaves and other policies that are in there? I think companies are very generous to give paid compensation for vacation time when you leave. I think the purpose of vacation time for most companies is that you want your employees to be good workers for you, but also have time off while they're working for you. This kind of goes down a very slippery slope of where people will not take vacation and try to collect an extra paycheck if they're leaving. And I don't think that's a good policy. And there may be ramifications for the individual employee once this bill, if this bill passes. Companies will be starting to look at it. What is their policy and how much earned time are they doing? And how do they adjust for that? So I think there could be some negative consequences for current employees if this goes into effect. So I would hope that you really take a hard look at, the bill sounds great, it's very simple, one page, but I think it does a lot more than what we really want to do in adjusting how our current system works. And I would hope that you would oppose this legislation.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the committee?
Thank
Seeing
you.
none, thank you for your testimony. The chair will now recognize Josh Reed. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairwoman. Good morning, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Josh Reep. I'm the President and CEO of Associated Builders and Contractors, which is a parallel organization to Mr. Abbott's. But there's been a lot of good points covered today on some of the perils that this legislation would cause for the employer community. And I'd like to touch on a couple specific to the construction sector that some of my contractor members would feel would possibly be a challenge with a bill like this. We represent a lot of different trade contractors, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, pipe fitters, etc. And under this bill, paid time off calculations could be confusing to a contractor who does work under Davis-Bacon provisions. That's because the wage classifications are often set by Department of Labor or vary by trade. So over time, what happens is an employee may change roles within their company. So they may start, for instance, they come onto the job as a laborer, pushing a broom around a job site, earning and learning as they go along. They might enter an apprenticeship, become a carpenter, mason, electrician, etc. So over time, they're accruing that vacation time under this bill that would effectively become an earned wage over time. As a laborer, you're earning a different wage and classification than you are, say, a carpenter or a journeyman electrician. So over the course of several years of employment, you're talking about accruing time off that under DOL, they look at it and say, well, what was the wage at that particular hour of earning for that benefit? That's important for anyone that's doing any kind of federal rate work. So at the end of this, if someone comes out of this and says, well, you're now an electrician and you're leaving employment. Well, but how many hours was that spent as labor? How many hours that could have spent as a helper carpenter? It's confusing. It's something we don't keep track of already, and may cause some issues when it comes to annualization of benefits over time for a contractor doing any kind of rate work. And secondly, this is also going to be a challenge for those employees that have negotiated fringe benefits with their employer through a collective bargaining agreement. This effectively, I don't see here where this is going to be, I question this may actually negatively impact those collectively bargained fringe benefits that some people may have negotiated with their employers through additional benefits as well. So those are just a couple additional points I wanted to bring up from an industry perspective that could be an issue for us. And that's why, it seems like good intentions, but I just think that this bill is just not ready for prime time. We encourage you to not move forward with this package today. So that's just, I think that, and I also echo what all the other people had said so far today. So thank you very much, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The chair will now recognize Catherine Provencher.
Good morning, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Senate Commerce Committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Provencher. I serve as the Chief Administrative Officer and Vice Chancellor of Finance for our state's university system. The university system prides itself, we provide a comprehensive competitive benefits package, just as previous folks have testified, to attract and retain talent. We believe House Bill 74 will really have some unintended consequences. Part of our benefits package is providing different types of paid time off: personal time, sick time, family time, other time. On the personal time, the university system allows our employees to accrue up to 45 days of unused time. But when they separate for any reason, we pay up to 30 days. And that allows the employee some flexibility while they're employed to be using that delta between the 30 and 45 days, and still, when they separate, have 30 days. We have about 1,100 employees that have more than 30 days of unused time. And so we did a spot calculation last week. That would result in about a $3.7 million liability being added to our balance sheet for that differential between the 30 days and the 40 days that we would currently pay out. Honestly, in all likelihood, what the university system would do is reduce our benefit that we'd only allow accruals up to 30 days. And so that would be a reduction in benefit that would not go over well, in my opinion, with our employees. We would have to negotiate part of that. We have multiple unions. So we think there are unintended consequences that would result in the university system actually needing to reduce the benefit that we currently provide to our employees. I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, I should say, the university system opposes House Bill 74, and we urge you to vote in expedient to legislate.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. The chair will now recognize Bruce Berkey.
Madam Chair, while he comes up, I should note that I am an employee of the university system. I will be participating in the debate and voting on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. For your record, my name is Bruce Berkey. I'm with Sheehan Finney Capital Group, and I'm here this morning on behalf of the National Federation of Independent Business. And the NFIB in New Hampshire has over 1,400 small business members. And we are opposed to House Bill 74. And you have heard some very, very good examples and detailed testimony in opposition to the bill, and we concur with all of those statements. There are costs, there are impacts on relationships between employers and employees, and all of those are likely to the negative for that small business. I've had the experience of being around this building for 40 years. I started in kindergarten. This bill has a threshold built into it of 15 employees. And many of our members do not have 15 employees. But a threshold in state statute I have seen over these last 40 years is an invitation to be changed. Today it's 15, tomorrow it could be 10 or 5 or every employee. And so the impacts that have been discussed and shared here this morning, we are very concerned about, and we would ask you to vote House Bill 74 inexpedient to legislate. Be happy to try and address any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. The chair will recognize Representative Grassi. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Just to play off Mr. Berkey's statement, I've been around these halls for 50 years, and I wasn't in kindergarten when I started. But I come here today because when I got back to the House about a month ago now, this was one bill that interested me because it affected me personally. And I just want to say I have two examples that I'd like to share with the committee. One example was when I worked in a white-collar job, and when an economic downturn happened, and they said, you know, your position's being eliminated, we're going to let you go. And in the policy, we had accrued time for vacation. And I said, well, how much accrued time do you have? And they said, well, we don't know. You tell us. And it's like, excuse me, you know, I'm going to tell you how much accrued vacation time you're going to pay me, because they never kept track of it. And that's one of the things this bill does as well, is it required that businesses that do offer this keep track of it. The second example that I have is a much darker one, because I wasn't in a white collar position. I was in a blue collar position. And when you're in a blue collar position, and when you have a use it or lose it policy come January or the end of December, and you ask the employer, how many days do I have left? Because I may want to take a day or two. I don't want to use up all my vacation before Christmas time. And they say, well, we don't know. And they really don't keep track of it as well. That's kind of difficult as a blue collar worker. But then when January comes around, and I'd been with this company for 10 years. When January came around, we had accrued our vacation time, and I was actually up to, after 10 years there, 4 weeks of vacation. And COVID hit. And one of my coworkers took their vacation time in February and got their full 2 weeks of vacation. And I hadn't taken my vacation time because of the business I was in. We had a lot of business during that period of time, and I felt it was my responsibility to work with the company, who was a family to me. But then when we were told one morning that the business would be closing down that midnight, and that, first of all, our insurance was going to end at midnight that day, and that they would have our paychecks ready for us the next day, you know, we could come pick them up, or they'd mail them to us. The first thing you thought of was, first of all, heck, what do? I don't have any insurance as far as tomorrow morning is concerned. And you're not thinking about, well, what do I got to do about getting my accrued vacation time? You're thinking about, can I pay the oil bill? How am I going to pay the mortgage this month, or the rent this month? And the company said, well, we'll bring you back, you know, as soon as we can. Well, weeks turned into months, months turned into almost 2 years before they started bringing people back. I never got my accrued vacation time. My co-employee took 2 weeks, but I didn't get mine. And a number of other people that came back didn't get theirs. And people that did go back to work did because they started off at zero after being away. Company hired them all back as if they were brand new employees. I did not go back to work for that company. But, they say that it only affects a few people, and you have a right to file a complaint with the Department of Labor. If you're a blue-collar worker and you think there's a chance you could go back to work for your employer, you're not going to file a complaint with the Department of Labor. And, eventually it just becomes something that you forget about. And it seems to be the little guys who suffer the most under the current situation. Whether it's this bill that you pass or it's a bill with some sort of an amendment to it to take care of some of the issues that people have, I think you need to do something. As I stated on the floor of the House, if one person is affected by the lack of us having a policy which protects them from losing this time off, which they earned by working, it may be a benefit, but it's a benefit that you earn for working and committing to your company. Don't even go there as far as unlimited time off. I worked for a company that did that, and every time you took a day off, you felt guilty as hell. Unlimited time off isn't exactly a fair thing to do as well. That's something else, that if you're an executive, you get all the unlimited time off. If you're a worker, you take time off and you're not a team player. You're not somebody who supports the company. So that's a whole another argument. And I'll just tell you that someone who's had it on both sides, as a white-collar employer and as a blue-collar employer, this is something I think that affects blue-collar employees much harder than it affects anyone else. And it's those little guys who I think we were all sent here to watch out for. The people at the top can take care of themselves. The people at the bottom can't. And when you're told your job is ending today, your first thought is not, well, how do I file with the Department of Labor? It's, how am I going to pay my bills tomorrow? Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. The chair will recognize Catherine Heck. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Senator Shardy and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Heck. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association in the 234 cities and towns here in New Hampshire. And I certainly don't want to waste your time, as many of the points as to the opposition that we have to this bill have already been raised. I did provide you written testimony that go through the 4 sections of New Hampshire state statute that are redundant to what this bill is already trying to accomplish, as well as the Department of Labor rules. So I'm certainly happy to take questions about that. However, we do feel this is already covered. And some considerations that we want to reinforce are collective bargaining agreements that are already in place. This could be impacted. GASB Statement Number 16, or the Government Accounting Standards Board Statement 16, which was touched upon in the financial statements. You can, I'll draw your attention to the fiscal note on the back of the bill, which would show the increase that employers would have to budget, or budget to maximum exposure, which for, of course, government agencies and entities would be on the backs of the taxpayers, in order to be sure that we have the cash on hand to pay out any change in this. And we do agree that this currently is a benefit and not part of the wage. So we did want to distinguish that employers currently can craft benefits packages, and you will see that throughout every municipality. It's going to be different in how a municipality handles how they calculate their benefits and what they offer to their employees. And we want to maintain that local control, because we are in a highly competitive labor market, and things like PTO that include sick time, earned time, and vacation time all in one have been proven to be very beneficial to many of our members, and we want them to maintain that ability. I did want to also share that the written testimony that you have in front of you comes from one of our members who believes that this would have a severe impact currently on their budget, and these liabilities have not been budgeted for should this legislation pass and be signed into law, because we are currently involved in our budgets processes, or they have just been passed, and this is to take effect 60 days after passage. So anybody that this impacts, the law would be in place, and our budgets have already been set through the next fiscal year. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for the opportunity.
The chair will now recognize Paula Minahan.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Paula Minahan, Senior Vice President, State Government Relations with the New Hampshire Hospital Association, representing all 26 acute care hospitals as well as our specialty hospitals. We are opposed to House Bill 74, and I will not repeat what has already been stated, but as others referenced, the changing changing vacation, earned time, et cetera, to compensation would constitute wages and would be problematic. Hospitals do have a variety of benefit options and packages that they offer to their employees that do provide flexibility and account for varying work schedules and needs of the hospital and their employees, since hospitals must cover multiple shifts to ensure 24/7 coverage. House Bill 74 does raise many questions and concerns and would be very challenging if the state were to dictate the benefit plan design a hospital could offer their employees. We do believe the private sector should be able to create and manage these benefit packages that they believe are in the best interest of their organizations and their employees. And for those reasons, we do oppose this legislation. And I am happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank
for your
you.
testimony. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 74?
I signed up to answer questions on the first sheet, and then second sheet, I marked off speaking.
Okay. Will come forward. What's your name? Okay. Oh. Yes, you didn't check speaking, but come forward. It's okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Tracy McGraw. I'm an attorney at the New Hampshire Department of Labor. I wanted to make a couple of statements, and then I also wanted to be able to answer any try to answer any questions that you may have. First couple of things that I wanted to mention, one of the last things that came out, we were talking about collective bargaining agreements, CBAs. There's nothing in this bill that the Department of Labor would interpret that would override a CBA that was already discussed, that's already in place. It may impact discussions in the future, but I can't predict how that will work out. But the Department of Labor would not interpret anything in this bill that would impact a current CBA. Also wanted to make sure that we were very clear on a couple of things that Representative Cahill had asked us about. So the Department of Labor, obviously, we adjudicate workers' compensation cases. We adjudicate wage and hour cases. We have done a calculation here that since August of 2022, now this is less than a year, obviously. Since August of 2022, we've processed 491 wage and hour claims. That includes everything that we're talking about here as far as in this number. We've rejected an additional 43 claims, so that number is not factored into what I'm discussing here. Of the 491 cases that have been filed, 100 of those cases have asserted unpaid vacation, holiday, or PTO claims. 100 of them, so that's a little over 20%. There have been 13 decisions that have awarded the claimant's vacation and PTO. And additionally, there have been an additional 13 cases where the employer actually paid the wage without a hearing. Now, we only went back to August of 2020 because that's when our system started to monitor these cases a little bit more closely. That is the only reason why we picked that particular date, just so that you know. As far as notice provisions, There is notice provisions that are required underneath the statute when it comes to wage and hour cases. Those notice provisions require that an employee be notified of what their pay is going to be, and having calculations as far as earned time, PTO time, vacation time, even sick time, even though it's not incorporated in this particular issue. Those things we've seen on a lot of pay stubs, on a lot of payroll sheets, and the Department of Labor would be easily able to interpret those documents for any type of a wage and hour hearing that came in. In addition, when we get these wage claims in, and I'm going to speak to layoffs and a sale of a company in just a minute. When we get these wage claims in, the Department of Labor has to look at all of the evidence. The employer may have a policy. The hearing officer is going to look at, did they follow their policy 100%? Did they follow their policy sometimes? These are issues that will come up, and I'm not going to answer as to how it would be determined at the end. That's for a hearing officer to review all of the evidence. But what we've seen in cases, especially where the employee has prevailed, is that the employee was able to present some form of evidence to show either one, that the policy was not being followed the way it was told to be followed, or that there was some other issue that they were able to bring up that brought it so that it was inconsistent enough to where they were able to be paid the benefits that they had earned. There was a question about 15 employees and whether or not 15 would invite the change, a change of legislation and other things. One of the things that I did want to point out today too, when talking about 15 employees, there is another part of the statute under 281A64, which is under the Workers' Compensation Act. And under this statute, it does talk about 15 or more employers when it talks about having a separate safety program and having to report to the Commissioner of Labor what that safety program is. So I just wanted to point out to the committee here that this is a number that is used in reference to others. And also to point out that the bill itself does not impact under 15 employees. As far as, okay, we were talking about layoffs and the sale of businesses. What we try to do at the Department of Labor is when there is a sale of a business, we have to look and see, number one, is there some kind of a contract between the buyer and the seller of that business that determines who accepts the assets and the debts of that particular business? That's an issue that has to come in. That's evidentiary, and the hearing officer has to determine the accuracy of it, the credibility of it, and also look at the language of that particular contract. Did the buyer buy all of the debts? Does that include payoff of or maintaining earned time, vacation time? If the case comes in and there's no documentation to support that the buyer accepted the responsibility of whatever that earned time was, the Department of Labor would seek out reimbursement of whatever was required from the prior owner. That's not always possible, whether it's because of insolvency or whether it's because the prior owner no longer exists, but it does pose a problem. But that is what we would be looking for. And once again, I want to emphasize that the Department of Labor is not here to support or oppose the bill. We are neutral on this bill. The Department of Labor will be able to accept and understand the intent of the final language of this bill, and will be able to apply it and administer it as required. And as far as, let me see, I want to make sure I covered everything before I leave it to questions. Okay. There was a question about PTO time being combined with basically being a single bucket of sick time, personal time, vacation time, holiday time, and that posed an issue. if this were the case, if that were, a consideration, obviously the Department of Labor would also accept whatever evidence came in at a hearing to support how the time may or may not be broken down, to support how time was earned. Was there a policy or was there language in place that the employees had full notice of, whether in writing or in a posting where everyone can see, as to what exactly the vacation time, sick time, PTO time was in relation to their employment there? All of that information would come into play at the Department of Labor to help determine the eventual result of that particular hearing. And of course, whichever party did not prevail would also be allowed at that point to appeal to the Compensation Appeals Board and eventually the Supreme Court. If I could just have 1 second, just to make sure that I've covered everything, and then I would be glad to take questions. I would be glad to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there any other members? Yes, you may come forward. You may approach.
Thank you for your indulgence. And I appreciate the input from the attorney from the department. I wanted to clarify that, for those that do PTO, all one bank, it's great. You can have anything you want. You don't have to tell us. We don't have to account for it. Under this bill, that could continue, and it would be the discretion of the employer whether they thought that perhaps they'd like to retract and separate those sick days, because the bill doesn't require them to pay for sick days. We hope people don't get sick, but we do hope they take their vacations because they've earned them. So that would be up to if the employer's mindset is that I gave you this 3 weeks, all one pot, and if you leave under good, in good standing, which means you weren't fired for cause, which by the way is not defined anywhere. If you leave in good standing, or God forbid there's a layoff, and I sell the business, you'll be taken care of. And my feeling was, when I gave you this policy that it's all PTO and it's all the same, I'll pay that. If the employer looks at this law and you should pass it, which I think you should, and says, well, I want to change my policy and I will keep track of sick days, and I won't pay the sick days if you don't use them. That's up to the employer. That's the discretion of the employer. So I'm just giving that because, as I said, vacation, we want people to take their vacation, be well rested, perform well in the job. And we don't want to look at vacation as something that we offer in lieu of a pay raise, because, the pay raise is every pay period, and the vacation is only if they use it, which is sort of one of the motivations for the unlimited vacation, which of course isn't really unlimited because it all has to be approved. So those are a couple of the points. Again, I thank Ms. McGraw, Attorney McGraw, for the issue about the CBA, that of course the CBA would not be trumped by this. The other point I want to make is the burden that this would be on employers. And there is a $4.5 million fiscal note, which Commissioner Arlinghouse came to testify in labor, and he described that the true impact as de minimis, because we are unlikely to have all the employees of the state or all the employees of the municipality or any municipality or all the employees of a hospital leave en masse. So we really don't have to say that this has a fiscal note of $4.5 million, or that would be an extraordinary burden to put on those businesses. And as far as I know that there are many fine hospitals in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts, the law goes further than this. You can, in fact, leave in very poor standing, and you'll still get your vacation pay. So, and I also know that my wife is a retired medical technologist who worked at Exeter Hospital for many years. ran the chemistry bench. And when they were acquired by another company, they always got, and it happened a few times, they would get, their hours would be transferred over. And even if someone had insurance that was better through their spouse, they would say, okay, we'll pay you some amount of money because you're not taking our insurance. There's a lot of flexibility out there that employers use. The only one I'm trying to address here is the one that costs the working stiff their vacation pay that they earned. So I'd be happy if you would, if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 74? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 74, and we will take a recess and welcome my students from Temple. I'm so happy you've come to visit the State House, and normally I would be upstairs and visit with you, but as you can see, we're very busy today in committee doing some important work. But I'm so grateful that you were able to come in here and visit, and if you have any quick questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes? What do you basically do?
Like you, we do as we're told.
Well, we represent, so I represent District 9, which includes Temple, and I have 13 towns that I represent. So I represent you, the people. I work for the people. And we have people and legislators put in bills. So for instance, you could call me and say, oh, Senator Ricciardi, would you put a bill in that says we never have to have homework? Would you vote for that? And we work really, really hard. We really do. Any other questions? So I think pretty much your. Okay. Can she one quick question? Okay, well, duly noted. Okay, you're going to go up and visit, so I'll see you again soon. Bye. You were going to wait on it. So we're going to stay in recess.
Yes.
Oh, well.
Can we take another minute?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be right back.
Okay. We're going to stay in recess for 5 more minutes. Thank you. We, all in favor of executive session? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
None opposed? I would like to just announce so that, in the interest of everyone's time, we are going to wait on executing House Bill 150, House Bill 467, House Bill 584, and House Bill 74. So anyone interested in, you don't have to wait around,
Go get a coffee.
okay? All right, do I have a motion? So the motion carried, so we are now in executive session. And do I have a motion for House Bill 42 FN?
Move on to Pat.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. None opposed? Senator Susie, would you like to take that out? Okay.
All right.
I now would like to have a motion for House Bill 210.
Move on to pass?
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor on House Bill 210 ought to pass?
Aye.
None opposed?
Great.
Senator Ernest, would you like to take it out?
Sure thing.
Thank you very much. I now move for a motion on House Bill 249.
I'll move on to pass.
Now let Senator Susie have the second.
Okay, all those in favor of House Bill 249 ought to pass, please say aye.
Aye.
None opposed? House Bill 249 is ought to pass. And Senator Chanley, would you like to take that out?
Certainly.
Okay. I would now like a motion on House Bill 261, please.
Move re-refer.
Ah,
I'll second that.
yeah, let's
Wanna
talk about it
discuss
for a second. Yeah, sure. I'm surprised.
I move re-refer because I do think the issue itself has merit. There are clearly articulated technical concerns with
Uh-huh.
language, and I think the bill is limited in that it covers allowing someone to get out of the lease. I think more people are trying to stay right
True,
now within
true.
the housing market. So I just think with a little more time,
Mm-hmm.
we might be able to get somewhere. I'm willing to put some time in. So.
It's the disability portion that really gets me. You know, someone gets injured, they can't make it up to that third floor apartment. They ought to be able to get out of that lease. I just hate putting it off longer. Maybe. How?
Well, if I had the answer.
I know, we'd have it. All right. I mean, I can do that. Is there a specific issue with it that bothers you so I can understand?
Yeah, I think the conflict with the Violence Against Women Act.
Ah.
There are some
Okay.
changes in the language that conflict with federal law, and it may
Okay.
make the state law a little more restrictive. That's the part that I'm
I
most
see.
concerned with trying to address, and I
Okay.
don't think we could do it in the short term.
The bill
Okay.
really did need so much work that I just feel that this gives the opportunity. And then if it can't be
Yeah.
worked, then we'll know.
I'm not opposed to that.
Okay,
I can jump on with that.
so then,
Thank you. I think that, yeah, I agree. I'm absolutely committed to the principles
Yeah. Okay.
that
All
drive
right.
this, but
but the bill,
I really want the opportunity to bring the stakeholders together.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, I'm supportive of what it's trying to do. So if we can make it better, let's do it.
okay, so just for, to go over it, we have a motion of re-refer on House Bill 261. We have a second. All those in favor of re-refer, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Senator Chanley, would you
I
like to
would
take
like
that
to,
out?
yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe now I would need a motion, if someone would, on House Bill 479.
479. I'll move out to pass.
Second.
Okay, so we have House Bill 479. The motion is ought to pass. All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Thank you. Who would like to take this out?
I can do it.
All right, Senator Ennis will take that out. While we're in executive session, is there anything else our committee would like to discuss?
Madam Chair, I think you said there is a large amendment coming on 584.
Yeah.
So we need to review before.
Yes, I got a message while we were here that it came in, and I believe it's about 15 pages. So I think that we need to look at that before we vote on that bill.
Okay.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else anyone would like to talk about?
Move to come out of exec.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor to come out of executive session?
Aye.
Aye. A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye, aye.
So
Thank you.
moved. Thank you, everyone.